all that much. And here, well, this is the best player on the planet, Magnus Carlson. I am stoked to see these two go at it because when they went head-to-head over the board in Toronto, as the first moves are underway, Denis Lazavik was a few careful moves away from making a draw in that first game, but ultimately it was Magnus who came out on top.
Surprised as you are, and while Magnus thinks, let's remind everyone the switch up. The losers bracket is a best of 2. The winners bracket is a best of 4. This is the first game. Magnus perhaps just trying to think about what kind of opening structure he wants. Now, to my knowledge, David, d3 is not the most topical move. Very often white goes knight f3, wants to strike in the center with d4. Magnus took his time. Is this what he calls the anti-young player chess?
Actually, I'm going to eat my words. This isn't the English opening. This is the Sicilian defense, just with colours reversed. And white has an extra tempo, having started the game first. So, yeah, Magnus, he's hoping that Denis, who isn't a 1e4 player, who doesn't play Sicilians on the opposite side, he's hoping he's a bit uncomfortable. So black has gone for what we would call an open Sicilian here. It's just kind of trading off pawns in the center. White's going for what we would call the Sicilian dragon setup with the beautiful bishop on g2. And the game will now proceed very, very quickly. Look at that bishop, a real sniper, so many targets on that diagonal. But Denis has reacted almost instantly since this small surprise. I've got to say, Robert, really impressive speed and confidence from the youngster.
But from colors reversed, and I would imagine, and he finally does play knight to f3, that would be the most logical continuation. To the left of our board, we see the win percentages in high-level games stemming from this opening, and white does have a slight lead, but many of these games are drawn, and that's what Denis Lazavik is known for. It sounds weird to say, oh, that kid is known for drawing, but really, he just doesn't lose very often. It doesn't matter who he's facing. It doesn't matter what color he has. He rarely loses games of chess, and that includes over-the-board tournaments at the highest level. It includes the Champions Chess Tour, Title Tuesday. Well, he is super solid, and this is anything but solid from Magnus. Knight to g5. I mean, he's playing some offbeat KG chess, and if I'm Denis, I think I just occupy the center. I think I might want to bring my knight up to d4. There are oftentimes tricks available if white isn't careful on this e2 square. So I think that Magnus, he's just trying to catch Denis off guard. But Tanya, this is still stable stuff from the 17-year-old.
And that's what he's known for, stable chess. We've seen him, we've seen his games very few times. I like the speed with which he's played. I like the fact that Denis has problems because the one trump that Magnus has in this position is the bishop pair.
With a semi-open c-file, there is some valuable terrain in front of this rook, especially if this knight moves out the way. David, what do you make of this move?
Kind of maintain that composure when Magnus inevitably does start to ask some difficult questions, starting with this move, queen to a4. Robert, a bit tactically here, suspect a queen on a4 often, but here...
So let's bring up the analysis board, because some players might be looking for tactics on this diagonal, but knight takes c3, removing the guard of the queen. After b takes c3, let's say you hop in with the knight to d4. I thought the evaluation would go all the way up in white's favor, but apparently it's not that bad. Knight takes e2, check, intermezzo was the point. The king slides to the corner. Rook takes d7. I thought that this knight was just trapped on e2, and it does look trapped. But amazingly, this is ridiculous. The move that black has here is bishop to c4. To see this, and then to properly assess, I get it that you can't take the bishop because the bishop on d2 is loose, but to consider this position here, where at the end of things, white has two bishops for a rook, and apparently it's just level. This is a rook and two pawns for two bishops. Yeah, it's a mess. But Denis, maybe if he calculates this deep, he could go for this variation. I thought it was impossible, but clearly there is a lot that's going on here that does not immediately catch the eye.
As Robert said, it's so difficult to evaluate. And wow, Denis, he's just traded off the knight, I believe. Knight takes knight. We're heading in that direction. Denis, he's so good strategically for such a young player, really mature, his kind of decision-making, his endgame skills, but also very sharp in terms of tactics. So I wouldn't have been surprised if he did play knight d4, but this is the justification. He didn't need to enter those murky waters. It's not his character. He just wants to trade off light square bishop's position from him.
And speaking of, well, unsound positional decisions, pawn to f3 from Magnus. The evaluation bar doesn't really budge. So objectively, this is a good call. I actually think practically it is
stable. It can be kicked out. It might even fall back. Maybe f3 is a move that Denis actually provoked to block that bishop. But look at that last move by Denis. He clears up another square on c6 for his own bishop. He really wants to keep it on this diagonal, making sure that he can neutralize the bishop pair that white has. I saw the eval bar. It did not approve of this queen trade, but from a human perspective, it looks like a very practical choice to make, David.
Yeah, it makes sense getting the queens off. It simplifies things somewhat, but this is kind of Magnus playing anti-young player chess. You mentioned it, that phrase, Tanya. While I was off camera, I quickly got out the Oxford Dictionary. I checked what that meant, and it's pretty much getting the queens off. Don't allow your young opponent any fun and any activity. You take the long-term advantages. Here, Magnus has the bishop pair we've talked about, and also the extra central pawn. And with all of those small imbalances, you try to tire out your young opponents. And of course, Denis is no ordinary youngster. It's no guarantee that it will work. But I think this is Magnus again, as Robert mentioned, just kind of asking small questions. Later, he'll again start creating threats, start pushing the white pawns. Which pawns will he push? Who knows? Denis isn't sure either. So Denis will have to burn time watching out for moves like f4 in the near future. And I don't really like the fact that he traded queens. Yes, it made things more simple, but remember, bishop pairs gain in power the longer the game goes on, the more the board clears up. So this endgame, I would think, against anyone in the world, it would be a bit more one-sided. Magnus is on the white side, but yeah, Denis, if he proves yet again, as he has done this whole week, that he can hang in these tight endgames against the world's best, then he will deserve this result. f7, what do we think of that, Robert?
I like that move from Denis. At some moment, he can consider bringing his bishop back to d7. And f4, that's the big idea for Magnus, creating a pawn break. But perhaps Denis won't allow the pure break and will push himself to e4, just trying to ask questions to white's pawn structure. So far, there hasn't been pieces staring at one another. We're just seeing some maneuvering, but I do still think that white's plans are easier, and it's in part because there are more pawns for white in the center. We see 2 pawns for white, one on d3, one on e2, just one for black, and we have lovely pawn chains. For black, the pawns are a bit scattered, and I do think that at some point, white will play f4. You just have to time it correctly and meet e4 with d4. So Tanya, I think that Magnus, he's in a quintessential Magnus position.
You've put it really well. And I don't think there's anything scarier than playing Magnus in these kind of endgames where mere mortals like us might be like this, eventually will fizzle out into a draw. One of the minor pieces might get traded off. No weaknesses for black. Magnus Carlson is already smelling blood here. He's got the bishop pair. He's looking long term. He's placed his rook on b1, f4 always in the air. Although the last move by Denis, I like it. He puts that pawn on b6. You want to place as many pawns on the dark squares to limit the activity of that dark squared bishop that Magnus has, because that's the bishop that Denis is lacking in the position. He's moved the h-pawn. I won't be surprised if you might see g5 on the board as well, trying to restrict that f4 break that you were earlier alluding to, Robert. It's far from over, but playing against Magnus, this can be a terrifying position, David.
Yeah, for sure. This position actually did appear on page 83 of Grind Like a Grandmaster, so Magnus has studied it before. And pawn to f4. Robert, it's this big question, what to do. Black has to break the beautiful pawn chain that black has from g7 to e5. You have to make a decision now to block it, lock it, or just try to, I was about to say maintain the status quo, but you can't. He does indeed push his pawn forward. What do you make of these changes in structure?
Well, I do like how quickly Denis is responding. He is trying to control the light square, so if the bishops had been traded, then that knight would have just hopped into f5. But for now, that knight on e7 is a bit restricted. Pieces fighting for the same squares. I won't be surprised if Magnus uses his king, but don't rush a decision like that, because at some moment, black can strike, pushing his e-pawn forward. But if this white king, I'm just going to teleport it on over to e3. This is a problem for black in many of these positions. I'm just, hovering the king over the square. I'm blockading. I'm putting pressure on your e4 pawn. So this e4 pawn, the main point, is overextended. Tanya, I still don't see easy plans for Denis. He's shuffling back and forth. The engine isn't suggesting it's a winning advantage for Magnus, nothing of the sort. But his moves are just always easier to play.
I think Denis just has to wait right now. He has to keep shuffling with the rooks, like you mentioned, keep the position as is, and let Magnus show what is his improving technique here. He plays the move e3, so making sure that black doesn't have that e-pawn push anymore, which at the right time would have activated that bishop, gets the other rook into the game. To me, it's really impressive the speed with which Denis is responding, a position that's slightly passive for him. Because for Magnus, he's playing not only the board, but also Denis's clock. So Denis needs to make sure that he has those extra seconds, that extra minute, when those critical decisions will have to be made. And they will come when you'll have to decide which pawns to trade, which pawns to push in this position. Do you ever want to make a move like G5? Do you just want to stay still? So there are some big decisions ahead on the road for Denis. I like his speed. David, how do you think, you know Magnus best, what do you think is going on in his mind right now? How does he see this being played out?
Magnus is just calculating. I think he's turned off the emotions here. It feels like Magnus has upped his game from yesterday, where there was a bit of inconsistency. There are a few slip-ups here and there. He's just gone back to basics. Magnus kind of 1.0, the Magnus who first broke onto the scene, where it's just about grinding himself and kind of, look at this, pawn to c5 now, undermining Black's stronghold on the queen side. I think this is Magnus zeroing in. You mentioned being impressed by Denis's speed, Tanya. I was too. But suddenly I look at the clock and he's a minute and a half down. Suddenly the Black queen side on the verge of collapse. So, yeah, it feels like Magnus is, again, keeping things simple. Rook to b2 there, just covering the a2 pawn. Soon the white light squared bishop will come into the game. There we go. It reroutes itself. And yeah, I've got to say I'm very biased towards the white position right now. It looks like Black is just really tied up defending everything and no active plans. Where the breakthrough is, who knows? Magnus and Denis both know better than I do, but right now it does look like White's advantage only growing kind of incrementally, step by step, Robert.
Every single move. And this pawn on a5 is just such a problem piece for Black to deal with. If this pawn were back on a7, you'd feel like you had a healthier structure. For now, the knight on c8 can't easily get out because you might drop the b6 pawn. You don't want to take on c5 because then a5 will drop. So here it's about making that incremental progress that we're talking about. A bishop to e2 at some moment to also play g4, further expansion. But if you start trading pawns, it gives the Black rooks some files. So I love the way Magnus continues to play. His rooks have chance. I don't care about that question mark. Get out of here with that. That's not a question mark move. And I don't even know what Black should do to respond. It says Black's best move here. Yeah, it was going to be played. Knight to e7, giving away this b6 pawn. So if that's the way to get out of it, you're not finding that as a human with 1 minute and 15 seconds on your clock. Magnus is doing everything right, in my opinion. He controls this board.
Look at that last move, pawn to a3. He's in zero rush at all. Again, instructive for everyone at home. When you have a long-term advantage, when there's no immediate threats from your opponent, you don't need to rush, just slowly improve. He's freed up that white rook on b2. Now it will no longer be tied down to that pawn. As Robert mentioned, at some point he might even play king to g2 to defend the white h3 pawn, kind of let the light squared bishop loose to start playing. And Denis, every single move he's asked with a question, what are you doing? How do you improve? Black cannot improve his position, cannot create any threats, and that burns time on the clock. Look at this, 30 seconds. Tanya, the time situation, it looked under control, but suddenly no longer.
It's always so impressive how easy Magnus makes these end games look. He has this unique ability to combine all these different aspects in the position. He first advances on the king side, gains the space, slowly improves the king, puts the rooks on the correct files, which potentially long-term can open up, so they're ideally placed. Meanwhile, Black's rook doubled on the D line, but they're undermined by that D4 pawn. The bishop's coming into play, small moves like a3, forcing Denis to make a move, which is much harder when you lack spaces. And for Magnus Carlson, it just feels like the Magnus magic when it comes to these end games. And look at him on the camera. He looks so incredibly confident. And now Denis has to hold this position with just 20 seconds on the clock.
Complete control from Magnus Carlson. Every single little move, a pawn push to get off the diagonal. And by the way, Denis is getting really low on time, and that's when mistakes happen. Advantage growing, and bishop e2, a correct response, keeping that king frozen, opening the C and B files. But where is the knockout? There must be something here, or at least in the near future, as Denis is under 10 seconds, David.
And there we go. Magnus opens up a second front of attack. He's already probed away on Black's left flank. Now he's switching focus and hoping to overwhelm the Black army. And wow, every move, suddenly it's kingside, then queenside, kingside and queenside. And there we go. Rook to c6. He's infiltrated enemy lines. He's into the 6th rank. That Black knight is so sad right now. Denis's time situation is sad as well. 8 seconds left. It's on the brink of collapse, as you say, Robert. Still yet to kind of click that domino, flick it, and for everything to start toppling. But Magnus is looking for the breakthrough. Yeah, here, there's so many tempting moves right now for White.
A lot of tempting moves, and it's also so instructive how Magnus kept improving his position, made these small moves, and only went for the g4 break when Denis was down to seconds, because it's such a difficult move to respond to. And he might give a check on c4 right now. I don't believe you can fall back with the bishop. I'm already looking at ideas like the d pawn moving forward, and that would have been tactics that would have worked in Magnus's favor. It just looks like Black's pieces are losing harmony right now. The rook is active, the knight on c8. There has to be something really strong right now. Can White start thinking about advancing the d pawn? Does he put pressure on the c8 knight? What's the move here?
Too many good options. I'm actually not sure, and nor is Magnus, and that's why he's doing the right thing. He's slowing down. He pushes his pawn to d5. It opens up a diagonal for the dark square bishop. But look at Denis. He is hanging in there. He may have 7 seconds left, but his last few moves have been solid. Magnus is like, how do I actually win this game? Because if Denis gets his knight out, watch out. I mean, suddenly this becomes a bit messy, and White's king is feeling a little bit lonely. There could be checks against it and things of that nature.
Denis, he's so resourceful. Wow, Magnus sacrifices the exchange. I was about to say Denis nearly never loses because he defends better than most players in the world. And suddenly he's given up another pawn on the a5 square. Magnus's d pawn looks huge. He played that last move with 3 seconds left, Denis. It might be the crunch of time trouble here. A pin? He needs to react. He defends his bishop. Magnus's bishops are going to become monsters. There we go. Another pawn drops. It's bishop and 2 pawns for the rook and a check. Has Magnus seized it now? Denis shaking his head. Robert, he's on the brink.
Yes, a win for Magnus Carlson, resignation, but it was time that did Lazavik in. You see the last move, a brilliant